Yep.
All right, well, hello. Thank you all for joining us. Welcome to this webinar, which features 4 extraordinary warriors in the fight for criminal justice reform. I'm Mark Howard. I'm the founder and president of the Frederick Douglass Project for Justice. I'm also a professor of government and law at Georgetown University. Today's event is a co-production of the Douglass Project and the Righteous Convictions podcast. And I want to thank the Righteous Convictions podcast team, which is under the umbrella of Jason Flom's Wrongful Convictions podcast series. And I want to also congratulate them for recently being nominated for 5 different Webby Awards. Part of today's episode will be recorded and then released as a Righteous Convictions podcast episode. I'm thrilled to introduce today's panelists, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jason, who will moderate the conversation. All 4 speakers are key participants and supporters of the Douglass Project, and we're honored to have such dedicated and inspiring leaders on our board and our staff. As many of you know, the Douglass Project was founded to give members of free society the chance to see firsthand the humanity of incarcerated people. And today's conversation is in service to that goal. Our hope is that this understanding will drive reform that makes the criminal justice system more humane, compassionate, and just. And in today's polarized climate, these humanizing conversations and work are as urgent as ever. The Douglass Project's prison visitation program will give outside visitors the chance to come inside a prison, virtually starting in May, and then in person starting in the summer or fall as we roll out our program once it's safe to do so. And they will tour a facility and then have connecting conversations with a group of incarcerated residents. So stay tuned for our prison visitation program. Sign up for our mailing list and you'll be notified about the launch and hopefully have an opportunity to join us both virtually and in person on some of our visits. So now I'd like to briefly introduce the panelists, although they don't really need much of an introduction. Jason Flom, our moderator, is the founder and CEO of Lava Records, and he's the host of Wrongful Conviction with Jason Flom. Jason's also one of the country's foremost supporters of criminal justice reform causes, and he's a board member of the Frederick Douglass Project for Justice. Sister Helen Prejean is the world's leading advocate against the death penalty, and she's the author of Dead Man Walking, which of course was adapted into an Academy Award-winning movie, and she's also written 2 other books. Throughout her career in ministry, Sister Helen has been a visible and ferocious champion for the humanity of incarcerated people, and we're proud that she's also a Douglass Project board member. Amanda Knox is an exoneree, journalist, and the co-host with Chris Robinson of 2 successful podcasts, most recently Labyrinths, and she's the author of a best-selling memoir, Waiting to be Heard, which is based on her own harrowing wrongful conviction in Italy, a story that's also featured in a powerful Netflix documentary. In her journalism and podcasting, Amanda regularly highlights the voices of formerly incarcerated people, and she too is a Douglass Project board member. And finally, Brian Ferguson was exonerated in 2013 after serving over 11 years in a West Virginia maximum security prison on a life without parole sentence. He went on to complete his undergraduate degree at Georgetown while also serving as the director of the DC Mayor's Office on Returning Citizen Affairs. And he recently spent a year studying at Oxford as a Marshall Scholar, and now he's the Chief Operating Officer of the Douglass Project. So our format for today is that Jason will moderate a roughly 20-25 minute conversation with Sister Helen, which will then become integrated into the Righteous Convictions episode. And after that, he will include Amanda and Brian in the discussion. And I want to note for everyone, the chat function has been disabled, but audience questions are welcome, and they should be written into the Q&A section, and we'll address some of them at the end, time permitting. And now let me turn it over to our moderator, the one and only Jason Flom.
Thank you, Professor Howard. And with your introduction having been so kind, but also so straight, I'm just going to say this, there's a joke here somewhere. I'm feeling like an atheist, a nun, a professor, and 2 exonerees walk into a Zoom. And then I don't know what happens next, but hopefully by the end of the podcast, at the end of this presentation, I'll have the punchline. So, but we're here to talk about something that is as serious as could be, of course, which is the death penalty. And I'm just, I'm a little bit flushed because I'm so honored and humbled to be with all of you, so many of my heroes here on, and none greater than Sister Helen, who has done, in my view, probably more than any other single person to help shift public attitudes and perceptions about the death penalty in the United States. Sister Helen, why do we kill people to show that killing people is wrong?
There have been a number of cultural factors, sociological factors that happened. Crime started rising in the 70s, and actually politicians got a hold of this issue. And I say cultural because it's really clear now the pattern is that in the former slave states where it's very popular to be tough on crime, especially against people of color. Politicians went for it in the 80s. All the rhetoric you heard was, we got to go for the death penalty. These crimes are so terrible. And it was based on this fundamental and arrogant belief that we're going to be able to sort out the worst of the worst murderers, not your ordinary murderers now, not your garden variety, but the worst of the worst. We can sort that out. And then we have a system in which we're going to be able to apply all the rights of the Constitution and carry it out. We'll never make a mistake. And so we started killing people. The American public that I believe are good, I stand strong in the goodness of the American people, were made to be afraid. And when you make people afraid, and then you shield them from seeing what it means to really execute people, they were told there are some people by their nature, they're natural born killers. We can't even put them in prison because they'll kill other inmates and guards. They're evil people, and people were made to be afraid. That's why I think the Frederick Douglass Project, where you actually bring in people to meet prisoners so that you can shed that label, is one of the most important things we can do. So politicians got currency from it. Offices buy it. Prosecutors in Louisiana would brag about how many death penalties they got when they were running for another audience, another office. And so people were benefiting from it. And so people started being killed, and the people were shielded by the secret ritual of actually seeing what it means. There have been 2 court cases, try to make executions public. They've been defeated. The secret ritual keep the people from seeing it at the end of what it means to take a conscious, imaginative human being and strap them down and kill them. And I got thrown in as a witness to all that.
Right. We moved lynching indoors effectively. And it's also true that the
actually, Jason, lynching is really clear that you're killing a person. We have masked death. We've done the medicinal thing. Oh, we're just putting them to sleep. This is much more humane. And that's a mask on top of a mask. Lynching is honest. You kill a person, you hang them, or you shoot them.
Right. Well said. And thank you for that. So on death row, we make things as miserable as we possibly can. As miserable as U.S. prisons are, we try to make the people on death row even more miserable. And then there's another stage before they're executed, where they go to a death cell where they're subject to even worse deprivation of a kind that I think would shock the audience. But before we even get there, I want to say I was on the phone with Julius Jones on death row in Oklahoma this morning. He asked me to send you his best, as did Jens Zuring from over in Germany, and so many others. And I must say that having visited innocent people on death row like Rob Will and Rodney Reed, I can't leave them out of the conversation. Clinton Young in Texas, who I haven't visited, but who I'm trying to help.
Good.
And
really
you
immersed.
You are a source of hope for these people that is as necessary as it is profound. So the question, I guess, is when we know that we have executed as many innocent people as we have, for instance, you mentioned Louisiana, where Harry Connick Sr. had sentenced 8 people to death at one point, and 6 of them were exonerated, right? We know that in Florida,
huge. Huge
Right.
numbers. Mhm.
We know that in Florida, they've executed 99 people since the reinstatement of the death penalty, while 31 have been exonerated from death row. So even if we disregard Jesse DeFaro, who is innocent and executed down there, even if we disregard the other innocents who were executed, they're not even getting it right 70% of the time.
Yeah.
How can we persist? And what do you say to people who say, well, that's okay. I mean, you got to let God sort them out.
No, the American people are good. You bring them there and you say, would you look at this now? 185 wrongfully convicted people have gotten off of death row by luck, by God's grace, by that they were fortunate the prosecutors didn't destroy the evidence. For every 8 people we've executed, we've had to let one person get off because we made a mistake. Would you buy an airplane ticket where they give you a little alert? You got a 1 in 8 chance that the plane's going to go down. We are making so many mistakes, but you got to help people understand it's been flawed from the beginning. The Supreme Court, when they put back the death penalty in Gregg v. Georgia, they put an impossible, fuzzy criteria, only the worst of the worst. Nobody knows what that means, coupled with the discretion of prosecutors to go for death or not. And we just watch what that means with Trump and Barr. After 17 years, no executions on federal death row. They decided to kill 13 people, and they did because it's their discretion. So it was flawed from the beginning. It can never work. And we're beginning to see it doesn't work. And the country is shutting down the death penalty. State after state is putting it down. Even Virginia, the first of the ex-Confederate states. Black Lives Matter is making a huge difference because we begin, and you can see the racism that is in the death penalty. 8 out of every 10 people in this country that has ever sat on a death row cell and been executed is because they killed a white person. Because white life is much more highly valued, and there's outrage when white people get killed, whereas when people of color get killed, nobody's outraged. Negligible life, negligible death. But people can learn, and we are learning about it. Education's so important.
Yes, it is. And you're a huge part of it. And I have to say that, as much as everyone, myself included, of course, has seen, I feel like everyone has seen Dead Man Walking or read the book or seen the opera or whatever. But this book here, this has become my little Bible. Okay. And I'm talking about The Death of Innocence, which is such an incredible, well, the New York Times said it best, it tests our conception of human decency. And it's so important to me. I mean, I'm obviously very focused, and on our show, Wrongful Conviction, we've had innocent people like Rob Will and Rodney Reed who remain on death row, but we've also had people who've served time on death row and been exonerated, like Randall Paget, like John Huffington, and many, many others. But what I find really powerful about your approach is that I think you're someone who's come along and said, it doesn't matter. I mean, of course it matters that they're innocent, but what you have really, I think, brought to the consciousness of the public is the idea that killing people is wrong, period, right? Some of the people that you profiled in this book were innocent, and others were people who the death penalty, when they designed it, was designed for those people. But your thing is killing people to show killing people is wrong, period, full stop. Am I right?
It is, but you got to break that down, Jason. You just simply say to people, killing people who kill people, I mean, great, but you got to break it down for people. You got to, like I show in Death of Innocence, how do the courts actually work? So you go in for the trial of your life or your death, you have constitutional rights. But if you don't have an advocate by your side to make those rights actualized, they don't exist. And then when you get to the appeals, which Death of Innocence I talk about, the Supreme Court has set up so many procedural bars to people when they finally, like Joseph Odell in Virginia, finally he got Barry Scheck freely. I'm going to do a DNA test. And Virginia wouldn't let him get the DNA test, said your time's expired. You were supposed to get the test early. And they let Virginia kill Joseph Odell, and then they destroyed the DNA evidence. You got to break it down that when you turn over this killing to government, and individuals, the prosecutors, even the president of the United States, it's going to be flawed. You got to show them that. And then you can see, well, like maybe in some books of justice, that terrible crime, they deserve to die. Who deserves to kill them? Who are we going to put in charge? Who's the agent of this killing? And to show people it's really about us as a society. And you can't trust government. That was the essence of my conversation with Pope John Paul about the death penalty. And I said, Your Holiness, I meet a lot of Catholics who say they're pro-life and talk to them for a little while. And what they mean by pro-life is they're pro-innocent life. But when it comes to people doing crimes, they do draw a line and say, yeah, but those that murder deserve to die. So they're pro-life for innocent life, but not for guilty life. And I said to him, I said, when I'm walking with a man to execution, he has on leg irons, his hands are handcuffed to a belt around his waist, very tight, so he can't move his hands. He's surrounded by 6 guards, and we're going to walk across this hallway, and they're going to strap you in, and they're going to electrocute you to death. And he turns to me, and he says, Sister, please pray that God holds up my legs while I make this walk. And I said, Your Holiness, where is the dignity in taking a human being and rendering him completely defenseless and killing him? We have other means in our society to keep society safe. How can we justify the inviolable dignity of human life? Where's the dignity in this death? We need you to help change that. He did, and he played his part. But as the people's consciousness, Vatican II described, redefined the church as the people. And same thing for democracy. Consciousness changes in the people, then the people's voices rise up and we change things. That's what's happening here too.
And let us not, I would feel remiss if I didn't mention the fact that there have been people executed in this country, numerous people, where the prosecutor has refused to allow to have the DNA tested just to find out as best as we can whether or not they're guilty or innocent. Sedley Alley is on my mind as I say this, where the prosecutor, Amy Wyrick, is still fighting not to have the DNA tested, even though he's been executed for executed quite some time ago.
And when we talk to Brian and Amanda, who are the most important voices we want to hear today, you're going to find out every time when people are wrongfully convicted, 80%, 8 out of every 10 times, it's prosecutorial misconduct because they have charge of that evidence and they put their sights to get somebody because they're under public scrutiny, and they put the spotlight, even though there's other evidence in the police report on that shows it might have been somebody else, and they get caught in this political thing of going to get a sentence because it ups their assurance by the public that they'll be reelected.
Right. And of course, in Sedley Alley's case, as in others, the actual perpetrator remains at large, free to do as they will. And often that has very dire consequences for other people who fall victim to that person. And that, again, the prosecution seems to turn a blind eye to that very real consequence. And I'm super excited to get to Amanda and Brian, both, again, heroes of mine and friends. But before we do, there are so many troubling cases. I mean, we could talk for a year and we wouldn't scratch the surface, but there is none, in my view, more troubling than one that I know you have a personal connection to, and that, of course, is the case of Richard Glossip. This case is, to me, the most sickening, disgusting, incomprehensible injustice that I think. I mean, I can't think that they're all horrible. So it's dumb to compare, but there can't be one worse than this one. And can you please talk about the Richard Glossip case, because he's still facing execution?
Sure. Let me tell you, in one sense, Jason, it's not incomprehensible. It fits into the pattern because that was Bob Macy as the DA or assistant DA. He went for the death penalty 54 times. So here comes this murder. And this is a motel owner killed with a baseball bat. And they have the guy, Jason, what's his name? Sneed. what's his name? Sneed. Justin
Yes.
Sneed,
Justin Sneed.
who's a severe meth addict. They have that little guy sitting in that room, and they threaten him with the death penalty. And then they feed him the lines, and oh yeah, and he confessed that I killed the person with a baseball bat. But Richard Glossop hired me and was the mastermind. So that's one step removed. Look at this. Look how tenuous it is. But why did it happen? Because Bob Macy wanted it to happen, that discretion of prosecutors. And we are seeing the pattern across the United States. Less than 2% of counties are responsible for over 50% of people on death row. And Richard Glossop got caught in that. He got caught in Bob Macy, Cowboy Bob Macy's whole thing of I'm gonna cut as many notches on my belt. And that's part of it. I met him on the phone. He called me in early January 2015, and he got me. I mean, he just said, Sister Helen, this voice he has, he's got this sweet, soft voice. He just goes, Sister Helen, I apologize. I know I didn't ask your permission or nothing, but I put you down to be with me if I'm executed because I think you could help me. Excuse me for not asking your permission. And boy, I hung up that phone after talking to him that night. Of course, I said, I'll be there. And I woke up and I went. And from what I knew of the case, I went, that man he's not guilty. And I got on the phone and started, I called up Susan Sarandon. She had done these stories, death row stories with Robert Redford on CNN. I said, we got to start getting out to the media. The first thing I learned from Amnesty International was create doubt. So when things are signed, sealed, and delivered, oh, look how far he's been in the courts and all that, must be guilty, create doubt. And we had a press conference right away there in Oklahoma and just started raising the questions. Look at what Justin Sneed said. Look at all the different versions he gave. And just start raising the questions. And then what happens is people of good heart and goodwill see this and they start getting involved, like Richard Branson, this really wealthy guy who had Oklahoma connections. He gets in there, he takes out full page ads. And so the discussion builds, then social media gets on there. There were over 300 million people that knew about Richard when he was up for that first execution date in January. And then we did all our little Catholic connections too. And then Pope Francis weighed in too. And you're just getting it out to the public because people are good. They really don't want to execute anybody innocent, but they don't understand how it works. And there was enough of that buildup to stay the hand of Oklahoma. 3 times they brought Richard close to death. And 3 times that hand was stayed because of public opinion and people watching Oklahoma.
Right, Richard Glossop, and I'm going to open the conversation up with Amanda and Brian right after
Yeah, we
this.
want to hear from them.
But I just have to say on Richard, this is a man who had never had a parking ticket in his life, had his whole life ahead of him, was succeeding, had been one of, I think, 16 kids. And there's a movie called Killing Richard Glossop. I hope people will take their time to watch this very, very powerful movie by Joe Berlinger. And he was strapped onto the gurney twice. One time they were going to execute him with food preservative. They brought the wrong drugs and they were fine with that. But it was the governor who finally said, no, that's a step too far. And
well, wait, hold on. The governor only said that because the world was watching.
Yes.
And they were going to do to him what they had done to the person before, with the food preservative, because they were so lax in the way they're doing the drugs and lying about. She only did that because of world opinion. She would go to basketball games when people were being executed.
I would bet my life that Richard Glossop is innocent. He's as
innocent
innocent
as
I think the 7 of us had as much to do with that murder as he did. And it's just obscene that he's still on death row. So please, everyone, if you take one thing away from this, watch the movie, get involved with Richard Glossop's case, because it's not too late to save him, but he is still facing execution in Oklahoma. So,
and write to him and cheer him up, write to him, let him know people know his suffering. That's so important.
Yes, we'll put a link in the bio with the address, and we will also, and please write to the governor. The governor is the only person, he's out of appeals. He's the only person who has the power to stop this. So with that, Sister Helen, as you said, we have 2 guests who know far more than we do about this in this very, very deep and troubling topic. And so they've already been introduced by Professor Howard, but I'll just say my personal couple of words about them. Amanda Knox is someone who I call her my little sister, and she calls me big brother. And she has become quite literally family to me, and is just someone who I have the utmost respect and admiration for. I love her podcast, Labyrinths. If you haven't listened to it, my favorite episode is the elephant one. I forgot the actual title of it, One Bite of the Elephant at a Time or something like that. So it's really, really powerful and important. So please listen to Labyrinths. And of course, Brian Ferguson is a guy who, aside from being a world-class soccer player, then goes and gets wrongfully convicted at a soccer scholarship at school, and serves 11 years, as said, goes on to graduate from the most prestigious colleges and universities and graduate schools in the world. And now, of course, is running I think what is going to be such a powerful force for change, the Frederick Douglass Project. And I'm very honored to serve on his board and serve with each of you. So Amanda, where do we go from here?
Sorry, unmuting myself. So for me, the thing that and the reason why I decided to join the Frederick Douglass Project to address this issue is because I didn't realize what the realities of the criminal justice system and prison were, because, like Sister Prejean said, these things are hidden behind walls, and the public is not exposed to the reality of prisons and the consequences of our criminal justice system. And as a result, we're sitting here feeling peaceful about how justice is being done, but behind closed doors. And really, we need to open those doors and expose ourselves to the truth. And I didn't understand that until I was wrongly convicted, and I was forced into a horrible situation that I didn't deserve. And I witnessed tons of people who were innocent and guilty, who were suffering and not getting any better. So in my opinion, I think it's absolutely necessary that we expose ourselves to these realities and not feel comfortable just allowing them to happen without us having to think about it.
And Brian, for you, I mean, this was, as much as anyone, I mean, you were really on a great track in life, right? A star athlete, star student, great parents. Life was looking, terrific, I would say, right? Going back to before all this happened. And your conviction was, it's like, it never made any sense at all. So how did it happen in your case? And how did you overcome this monster that took over your life?
Yeah, Jason, I mean, it's was very traumatic to have your course and your trajectory completely change, by unjust action and unjust system in the criminal justice system. And, it really taught me numerous lessons. I mean, you mentioned, some of the schools that I have been blessed to be able to attend, but truly, I got no better education in the humanity of people and of the reality of the world than I did in my personal experience through the criminal justice system and in prison. And, I think that and encapsulating and crystallizing that for other people is really the kind of core issue of the Frederick Douglass Project, and is why I've been so, enthusiastic to come on board. And I really want to acknowledge the vision of the founder and CEO, Mark Howard, because just what you and Sister Helen were talking about earlier really struck me so much, that it's about changing the perceptions and attitudes of people. And there's no better way to do that than to lift the veil, from what people view as typically and generally, a just system. People kind of go about their day and don't really think about it, but in my case, in Amanda's case, in hundreds of thousands of people's cases, all across this country, that veil is lifted very acutely and very directly, having gone through it. But it is the case that if people are brought in and if, they're enabled to, because like Sister Helen said earlier, people, the American people, especially, are inherently good. And I think that if they're brought in and given light to something as unjust as what happens every single day in all of these courtrooms and on all of these streets, starting with, first contact with the police, ending up, in a lot of these penitentiaries, if they're shown that and given a real picture and not some caricature and not some, bastardization of what the reality is through the media, people's ideas will change, people's actions and perceptions will really change. And so what happened, with my case, having, been on a trajectory not having anything to do with, criminal justice at all, other than that I wanted to be, an attorney and to address some of what I thought I knew about the inequities. I had no idea. I kind of was just looking at the tip of the proverbial iceberg. But that kind of revelation is something, that can be replicated, and it doesn't have to come from going through the criminal justice system yourself. It can come from direct exposure, and that's why I'm so excited to be a part of the Frederick Douglass Project.
Yeah, I know from my perspective, I'll never forget, I had a moment when I went to visit Jens Zuring and Tim Wright, two innocent people who were in prison at Buckingham Correctional Facility in Virginia. And I walked out that day after spending several hours, and it was about 40 degrees and raining, cold, and it was in the middle of nowhere. And I was like, wow, there's nowhere else. I mean, this is where I belong. Like, I really felt a deep sense of like gratitude for being there as opposed to anywhere else that I could be. And I say that I find more humanity inside the walls than outside. And maybe other people will have that experience. And I want to ask you and Amanda, and either one of you can take these questions. What do we hope to accomplish with the Frederick Douglass Project from both perspectives? You both have had both perspectives of visiting others in prison and actually being visited in prison. And now we're taking a whole new approach to it. So what would be the ideal outcome from both sides of the wall? And either one of you can take either side of that question.
Brian, do you want to say anything, or I have something to say if you have
Well,
something.
No, go ahead. Absolutely, go first.
So I remember when I was in prison, and obviously it's not like you get visitors every day, but there were occasionally people who came through, usually a politician or two, who would do the walk down the hall while everyone's locked in their cells and peer inside. And I felt absolutely like a zoo animal. It was horrible. And I feel like what the Frederick Douglass Project is trying to accomplish is the exact opposite of that, where we're giving people who are inside the opportunity to meet face to face with people, not from behind like this wall, but like in a room together and be people together and find common ground and have the opportunity to find value in each other's experiences and stories, to give people in prison a voice for themselves, the opportunity to connect with others in a way that they've been denied. And on the flip side, people who are coming from the outside, not really knowing what to expect and what a prisoner is like, to have an actual human connection with someone and to understand that a conviction does not mean that that human being is somehow a different species than you. I think that's really the fundamental goal.
Brian, you want to add to that?
That's great.
No, I mean, that really encapsulates, everything that the Frederick Douglass Project stands for. And, we are tremendously happy, Jason, to have you, Sister Helen, Amanda, and so many others on the board, because it really is, an example of kind of the breadth of meaning that the Frederick Douglass Project has and what the focus is, and the different people and the different kinds of people from all different sectors, all different walks of life that are really affected by this criminal justice system. It really means a lot to me personally, and I know to the people that are incarcerated that there is an innovative program, there's an innovative project like this that is bringing their humanity and giving purpose to their stories and their experiences for the betterment of society, for the betterment of how we as a country are dealing with the criminal justice system. Fyodor Dostoevsky wrote that you shouldn't judge a society by how it treats, its most outstanding and wealthiest citizens, but rather by how it treats inmates in its prison. And the idea behind that is still true today, even though that was, written over about almost 100 years ago, that it's really about how we as a society decide to engage with people that are in the criminal justice system. And the way that the Frederick Douglass Project is bringing people together and exploiting the value really of the people that are coming from the inside, as well as the people that are coming from the outside, as well as the people that are on the inside, and bringing that together to a common goal is something that's not being done anywhere in the country. And again, it's something so unique and so powerful. And our vision and Mark's vision, for the project is to have this be the vehicle, the mechanism through which these conversations and these connections and these experiences are magnified throughout the country. So business leaders, church groups, prosecutors, judges, the people who are actually feet on the ground in the criminal justice system, people that affect the lives of individuals that are coming through and coming out of the criminal justice system. All of these people really need to have that experience of seeing what actually goes on behind prison walls. And there's no better way to do that than the Douglass Project. And I'm looking forward to this being a national, staple of people's, law school experience, of people's, everyday life experience. It really should be.
Right. And I want to ask you, Sister Helen, I mean, I get asked so frequently these days by young people, high school, college students who want to get involved. What can I do? Well, I'm just a person. You were just a person at one time. You were none. You weren't.
I'm still just a person.
Well, I mean, you were a person who wasn't involved in this cause at one time,
Yeah,
right?
that's for sure. Yeah,
You're still
right.
just, we're all still just people. But and of course I say to them, we'll start by learning, right? Read the books, read The New Jim Crow, watch 13th, listen to my podcast, Wrongful Conviction, on which both Amanda and Brian have been featured and have done such beautiful jobs telling their stories. But for young people, and you're right, Brian, the Douglass Project fills that hole. I can't say to them, we'll go visit a prison. They're not just going to show up. I mean, you could, but it's not a realistic scenario. Now we're going to break that sort of that logjam. But Sister Helen, you must get this question very often as well. How would, if someone is listening now and they are a young person who cares and they want to do something, they say, today I want to do something, what would you advise them to do?
You can grab the rope anywhere. The most important thing is to do something, because you're never going to get the plan all worked out, your blueprint for action. So you can go on my webpage, sisterhelen.org, and we have ways to write to prisoners in the United States. Get involved in something like the Fred Douglass Project. If you belong to a faith community in churches, dioceses, Catholic dioceses have prison visitation. The deacons are heading up a lot of those programs. You just got to start looking around where you are. You got to do a little research to go find, but then get involved. I got to tell you, I knew nothing about the criminal justice system. And when I walked on death row for the first time after writing this man, Patrick Saunier, letters are real connections, And the guards brought him in. They had locked me in a room. It was all super secure, death row, the whole bit. And I heard him coming with the guard. I could hear the leg irons dragging on the floor, which is ironically the last sound I kind of remember is his leg irons as he was brought to execution. They brought him in, they locked him in as big as a telephone booth, and there was this heavy mesh wire screen between us. And I looked through, and for the first time I saw his face. And I went, my God, he's a human being. I didn't know the crime yet. It's going to be a whole journey. But I looked in that face, and he was a human being. And so the connections, everything. You know, when I came out of the execution chamber when he was killed, I remember thinking, if there was a way, if we could just have a way that people in the country could just begin to meet prisoners, get that stigma off, get that separation. Because when you separate from people, you believe every stereotypical thing you ever heard. Same thing about white people out in the suburbs not connected with Black communities. How can we do a Frederick Douglass project just to start connecting people? Maybe have breakfast across the country where Black people and white people or people of different, ethnic backgrounds can have breakfast together, connect. The gospel, all the deep spiritual traditions. How are you going to say, he's my brother, she's my sister, unless you have that deep human connection?
I'm going to turn to questions now from our audience. Rosalind Smith said, as a person impacted by the justice system and who served 39 years, I would like to know if any of you have been affected by any collateral consequences of your incarceration, either mentally, physically, or emotionally. Amanda, Brian, whoever wants to take this one.
I think that collateral consequences are a very real thing, and they're definitely part of the effect that the criminal justice system has on people. And that, is for a number of reasons. The entire experience is completely traumatic, being ripped away from your, family and life and being put into an isolation situation. Oftentimes, segregation comes along with that in terms of being in, cell by yourself 23 hours a day and having to deal with the mental and even sometimes physical repercussions from that. Also, when people come out, I was the director of the reentry agency in Washington, D.C., and the collateral consequences with respect to employment, getting jobs, having to acknowledge that you have a criminal record is a tremendous detriment. Getting housing, signing up for different benefits and things like that, public housing. There are any number of collateral consequences that exist for people who are either in the criminal justice system or who have come out of the criminal justice system, that add up to, why it's such an issue. And really, who among us wants to be judged, and even especially in the United States, where criminal records are not expunged and not sealed to any large degree. Who among us wants to be judged forever for the worst thing that we ever did, or wants to have our family members, our sons, our daughters, or our parents be judged in that way? I think that as much as we can shed light, and as sunlight is the best disinfectant, the better. And collateral consequences are a very real issue and something that need to be dealt with.
So David Kim, who has been helping with this work now for the past almost a year and done really fabulous things, he asks, sister, when you talk to newcomers to the death penalty conversation, what's the one sentence that has really worked most effectively to convert them, if you only had one sentence?
I'm going to give you that, Jason, but I noticed Amanda also wanted to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't see her because I'm looking at the Q&A. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry,
so
Amanda.
Let's let her speak first, and then
Yes,
I'll be
please.
glad to.
Oh gosh, well, it's not terribly important, but
Oh yes, it is.
no, I was just going to add to what Brian was saying in terms of there's what prison did to you, which is put you into an environment of fight or flight, of hypervigilance, of feeling dehumanized and humiliated for however long that you ended up in that prison environment. But then I would say that the stigma, to repeat of what Sister said, the stigma impacts people whether they even committed the crime or not. And I don't know if Brian can also speak to this, but like when people if you have a history with the criminal justice system, in my experience, whether you committed that crime or not, that history with the criminal justice system is the thing that society defines you by. It's not what you do. It's not what you say. It's what you have been accused of. And that absolutely stays with you and has stayed with me ever since what happened to me in Italy. So I don't know if that'll ever go away. And I think that that is something that everyone who's going through the criminal justice system experiences. It's the first thing that people go, oh, I know who you are because you were accused of this, or you went to prison for this. So anyway.
Thank you.
Okay, so one sentence,
So my
Sister Helen,
one
this is like a
sentence-
speed round.
My one season. I mean, my one sentence is, there are some crimes that happen to innocent people that cause us to feel morally outraged, and that is legitimate. But to say we're going to set up a system in which we're going to select those people and then kill them, the theory of the death penalty is that it'll be for the worst of the worst. And then, so our killing them is righteous and it's legal. When you get into it and you begin to uncover the layers, and you begin to see all the mistakes and the way we actually carry it out, and it's actually fallible human beings who do it, you may get a different take on it. I urge you to read or to be able to have conversations, get on podcasts, listen, and learn about what's actually involved in doing this.
And now I want to turn, I'm going to go to Doreen Giuliano next, whose son John Juca is serving. He's been in for over 15 years for a crime he didn't commit. But first, Judith Van Wyck, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, I hope so. She said, I am part of a nonprofit that's opening a transition house in a neighborhood in Hillsborough, North Carolina. We're suddenly facing tremendous resistance. Can you suggest how we educate the neighbors and larger community about the truth of people who have paid their debt to society, who are trying to rebuild their lives? I mean, my answer would be, let's send it Sister Helen down there.
No. That's the opposite. You want to send somebody like Brian, and you want to send somebody like Amanda. When you go to talk to those neighbors, you got to do a lot of tilling of that soil for that little sprout is going to grow in that neighborhood. You can't just presume. And there's no better thing. You got to really do your groundwork in a neighborhood for this to happen. And who better have Amanda come with you and go meet with the people. And they meet in Amanda. And they go, well, she seems really like a decent human being. Because there's a lot of groundwork you got to do. It's tough.
Or I would say just do something like, we need to get the Frederick Douglass Project in that neighborhood, because if they were meeting people in prison, maybe they would feel less bad about people coming back into their community. So
way to tie it together. I saw what you did there. Way to tie it together. Go Amanda. Yay.
Get that in there.
Okay, so Doreen Giuliano, again, the mother of an innocent man in prison. And we know that pain, not firsthand, but secondhand so well from so many. But it's not something that we can imagine without having been through it ourselves. And Doreen says, how can we still say that America has the best justice system in the world? I don't know, Brian, I think this is perfect for you. You've done more studying than any two people I know.
So, well, first of all, I don't know that people really widely say that the United States justice system is the best system in the world. I would say, though, that, there is tremendous promise that I think that we have. Often we focus on the negative, and very justly so. But I think that in the last couple of years, especially, the last year, even more especially, there's been kind of a sea change that we can see happening in politics and in different areas about the criminal justice system. It's one of the only issues that you can see, even in a very tense political environment, the right and the left somewhat coming together. And, it's not anywhere near what it needs to be to get, affect change in the way that is going to be substantial, but it's something that is happening, and it's not happening in very many other sectors for anything. I mean, the right and the left can't agree on, what time of day it is, but everybody agrees that there's something wrong with the criminal justice system and something needs to be done. And so, I think that even though the United States justice system is inherently broken, it's based on, a system of inequity, racism, classism, and sexism, and so forth. But there are steps that have begun to be made, and there are, inclinations that have started to change. And so, we talked about a lot about the death penalty, and that is really the most striking aspect of the criminal justice system because it's so final. We also talk a lot in society and here about wrongful convictions because, you know, nobody is in favor of wrongful convictions. You would sound like a crazy person to advocate for something like that. But there are people who have been convicted of crimes for which they, you know, were guilty, and they too deserve justice. They too deserve, you know, consideration. And 98+% of people that are incarcerated are going to come home. And really, it's a question of, you know, what kind of neighbors do you want? People that are going to be in your communities, in your churches, in your home, in your you know, grocery stores and so forth. And making sure that society is ready and is aware of what's going on so that we can change it for the better is, you know, why I think the Douglas Project is well ahead of the game.
So as we're in the 5-minute zone, I'm going to take a page from AA. And I used to attend AA meetings, and they would often say, does anyone have a burning desire to share, before they would close out the meeting, so someone wouldn't go out and drink because they were annoyed because they were raising their hand the whole time and didn't get called on. So if there's a question that's a burning desire, someone wants to type it now, please do, or hold your peace. Again, Sister Helen, your website is sisterhelen.org, right? So people can write there. And it's, Brian, what's the Frederick Douglass website?
FrederickDouglassProject.org.
Pretty simple, frederickdouglassproject.org. And of course, Douglas has 2 S's.
It's just douglassproject.org, no Frederick.
Oh, douglassproject.org.
The
okay.
website.
Just douglassproject.org or sisterhelen.org. So writing is a simple way to get started. It's a great, it's so powerful. Okay, Kathy Claridge, I'm definitely pronouncing that wrong, but sorry, says, I run a nonprofit in Miami, Exchange for Change, which uses writing courses as a way to connect the incarcerated population with the outside community. Our graduations used to bring in dozens of people to sit with our writers, hear them perform their pieces, and as this whole webinar is stressing, create proximity. I wonder if there's a way we can join forces with your organization's mission. Would love to follow up. And she put her email address in there, so that's easy. We can certainly follow up, and I guess I'll leave that with you, Brian, to get the appropriate person to handle that. So I think I want to, we have more questions coming in, just as I suspected. Let's see, how do we get you to Iowa? I guess we just have to get to Iowa. Scrolling. Okay, here we go. Heidi McCafferty. This has been fantastic, so inspiring. Thank you from the hashtag Free Michael team, advocating for the freedom of Michael Wadsworth, sentenced up to 100 years by an all-white jury as a teenager as a result of a tragic accident in Nevada. Okay, that's not a question, but thank you for sharing that. So I guess, yeah, we have 3 minutes left. So how about if we just do 1 minute each? And thank you all. Thank you everyone for listening. Thank you, Professor Howard, for starting this and for including me and for putting this together. And now we'll do 1 minute, starting with you, Sister Helen, then Amanda and Brian.
One of the things we're waking up to is that we have a flawed Constitution. It's been flawed from the beginning. That from the beginning, slaves were not admitted as human beings and only white propertied males could vote. And we have a lot of redress to do, of fixing and growing out of a flawed Constitution. And at this point, we even have privileged people on the Supreme Court who cannot look at the 8th Amendment and see that word cruel and not acknowledge that to condemn conscious, imaginative human beings to death is not cruel. And they use their little legal tricks of the original things and all that kind of stuff. But as we evolve as a society into more and more of a moral society, and the people get it, finally, the Supreme Court is going to get it too, that the death penalty is the practice of torture. And in fact, long imprisonment for drug crimes is also torture and needs to be changed.
Amanda?
I'm just so thrilled to be here and honored to be here with all of you, and grateful for everyone who joined us for this call, for being willing to do the hard work of exposing yourselves to hard truths and for trying to help on this mission to spread the good word. So just thank you to everyone.
And Brian?
Yeah, no, thank you, Jason, for leading this today. I think, that in this last year, a lot of people have become more aware of the different issues, a lot of the different issues, especially within the criminal justice system, that exist in this country. And I am extremely excited about this next year coming up for the Frederick Douglass Project, specifically because we are taking the ideas that have formulated throughout the last couple of years, from everybody being aware of the issues that exist, and really doing something about it and coming at it from a unique perspective, and that is bringing people proximate to the criminal justice system to foment change. And I think that changing people's perspective and how they view things themselves is the best advocacy tool that I can possibly think of. And, I'm just really grateful to Mark Howard for establishing the Frederick Douglass Project. I'm really grateful for the entire board, for the staff of the Frederick Douglass Project, because this is so important. This work is so important, and the message is tremendously important. And, we're just grateful, for the opportunity, and the people that are on the inside. I've spoken to many, and I know that the rest of them are really looking forward to it as well. So.
Well said, bravo, thank you. And now to close out, Professor Mark Howard, our fearless leader.
Thanks, Jason. And thank you for guiding this discussion as I knew you would in such a beautiful fashion. Thanks to our panelists. Thanks to all the attendees who joined. I hope that it's given you a sense of what our organization is about, what we believe in, and how heartfelt it is. And for those who know already, please spread the word. For those who might have doubts, please join us, because we will be starting our prison visits in the near future. This COVID nightmare is almost behind us, and we look forward to welcoming you and many of your friends and acquaintances and other people throughout society to join us, because it is a magical experience and it's a life-changing experience. It's one that we want to share with everyone around the country, because if we do, we will actually defeat mass incarceration through this humanization. So I want to remind everybody, as we start gearing up for our programs to be implemented, to please sign up for our mailing list at douglassproject.org. Also, of course, download and listen to the Wrongful Conviction and the Righteous Convictions podcasts. And we look forward to seeing you on future visits of the Douglass Project. So thank you all for joining us. And once again, thanks to our panelists and to Jason. Bye-bye.
Thank you.